The more competent you become, the more convinced you are that you are faking it. That is not a paradox. That is a documented psychological pattern, and it affects an estimated 70% of the population at some point in their lives. 70%. Not 70% of anxious people, not 70% of underqualified people. 70% of everyone, including the people you assume have it all figured out. The person who got the promotion and immediately thought they made a mistake hiring me. The student who passed the exam and assumed the test was just easy this time. The professional who received praise and felt certain they had fooled everyone and it was only a matter of time before they were exposed. These are not isolated insecurities. They are symptoms of a specific, measurable phenomenon that has a name, a mechanism, and a neurological explanation. This is the science of imposter syndrome. And the most unsettling part is not that it exists. It is that it gets worse the more successful you become. The term was coined in 1978 by clinical psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes at Georgia State University. They had observed a pattern among high-achieving women that did not match any existing diagnostic framework. These were women with advanced degrees, professional accomplishments, and external validation from peers and supervisors. And yet, in interviews, they consistently described feeling like intellectual frauds. They attributed their success to luck, timing, charm, or the failure of others to see through them. They could not internalize their achievements as evidence of competence. The evidence was there. Their brains refused to process it. Clance and Imes initially believed the phenomenon was specific to women, but subsequent research proved them wrong. Later studies by psychologist Jarowan Sakulku and others found imposter feelings across genders, professions, cultures, and age groups. The rates were remarkably consistent. The experience was not about demographic identity. It was about a cognitive pattern that appears whenever a person enters a domain where the stakes feel high and the criteria for belonging feel ambiguous. And that cognitive pattern has a specific structure. Psychologist Kevin Cokley at the University of Michigan has studied imposter syndrome across diverse populations and identified 3 core distortions that maintain the cycle. The first is the discounting of positive evidence. When something goes well, the imposter mind attributes it to external factors. I got lucky. The interviewer was easy. They did not look closely enough. When something goes badly, the same mind attributes it to internal factors. I was not prepared enough because I am not smart enough. The attribution is systematically biased. Success is external. Failure is internal. Over time, this asymmetry builds a self-model in which no amount of success can update the belief, because every success is explained away before it reaches the part of the brain that would revise the story. The second distortion is the overestimation of others' competence. People experiencing imposter syndrome do not just underestimate themselves. They simultaneously overestimate everyone around them. Psychologist Quina Hoang has described this as a comparison trap. You see your own internal experience, the doubts, the struggles, the moments of confusion, and you compare it to other people's external presentation, the confidence, the polish, the appearance of ease. The comparison is structurally unfair because you are measuring your behind the scenes against their highlight reel. But the brain does not flag this as an error. It processes the gap as evidence that you are the only one struggling. The third distortion is the fear of being found out. This is not ordinary performance anxiety. It is the sustained belief that you are maintaining a deception, that the competence others see in you is a performance rather than a reality, and that exposure is inevitable. Clance called this the imposter cycle. Before a task, you experience intense anxiety. You either over-prepare obsessively or procrastinate and then cram at the last moment. If you succeed, you attribute it to the over-preparation or the last-minute effort, not to ability. If you fail, you take it as confirmation of what you always knew. Either outcome reinforces the belief. The cycle is airtight. There is no result that can break it from within. And here is where the neuroscience explains why the cycle is so resistant to evidence. Researcher Basima Tufik at MIT Sloan School of Management studied imposter syndrome in professional settings and found something that surprised the field. People experiencing imposter thoughts were not less competent than their peers. In several measures, they performed at the same level or higher. and they were rated by colleagues as more interpersonally effective, more collaborative, and more empathetic. The imposter feelings did not reflect actual incompetence. They reflected a disconnect between internal experience and external reality. This disconnect has a neurological basis. Research on self-referential processing, the brain system for constructing and maintaining a model of who you are, shows that this system is not designed to be accurate. It is designed to be stable. The medial prefrontal cortex, the same region Hirschfeld studied in his work on future selves, is responsible for maintaining your self-concept. And once a self-concept is established, the brain actively resists information that contradicts it. If your self-model says, "I am not truly competent," then every piece of evidence suggesting you are competent is treated as noise, an anomaly, an exception, luck. The brain filters it out the same way it filters out a consistent background sound. It habituates to the evidence and preserves the model. This is the same mechanism Robert Kegan described as the immunity to change and Carol Dweck identified in fixed mindset thinking. The system is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do: protect the existing identity from disruption. This also explains the paradox that opened this video. The more competent you become, the more imposter syndrome intensifies, because each new level of achievement creates a larger gap between the self-model and reality. And the brain resolves the gap not by updating the model, but by generating more anxiety, more attribution to luck, more fear of exposure. The connection to the Dunning-Kruger effect is not accidental. Psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger at Cornell University demonstrated that people with low competence tend to overestimate their abilities because they lack the knowledge to recognize their limitations. Imposter syndrome is, in many ways, the inverse. People with high competence underestimate their abilities because their expertise gives them visibility into just how much they do not know. The more you learn, the more you see the vastness of what remains unknown. And the brain, processing this awareness, concludes not that you are in the normal process of growth, but that you are uniquely deficient. Researcher Valerie Young, who has spent decades studying imposter patterns, identified 5 subtypes that describe how the syndrome manifests differently across individuals. The perfectionist sets impossibly high standards and interprets any gap between performance and standard as proof of fraud. The expert feels compelled to know everything and interprets any gap in knowledge as evidence they do not belong. The natural genius expects competence to come effortlessly and interprets struggle as proof of inadequacy. The soloist believes they must accomplish everything independently and interprets needing help as failure. The superhuman pushes to excel in every role simultaneously and interprets exhaustion as evidence they are not cut out for any of them. Each subtype generates the same core experience. I am not what they think I am, but the triggers are different, which means the interventions must be different too. So what does the research say actually helps? The most consistent finding across the literature is that naming the pattern reduces its power. Clance's original work showed that when people learned that imposter feelings were common, well-documented, and not indicative of actual fraud, the intensity of the feelings decreased. The experience did not disappear, but it shifted from "this is the truth about me" to "this is a pattern my brain runs." That reframe from identity to pattern is the critical move, because patterns can be observed without being obeyed. Researcher Adam Grant at the Wharton School has written about a practice he calls collecting disconfirming evidence. Instead of waiting for the brain to update automatically, which it will not, you deliberately build a record of your competence that exists outside your head. Emails of praise, successful project outcomes, concrete metrics, not to boost your ego, but to create a reference point that the brain's filtering system cannot erase. When the imposter thought arrives, the evidence is external and undeniable, which is exactly the kind of information the self-referential system struggles to dismiss. The second intervention is normalizing struggle. The imposter mind interprets difficulty as evidence of inadequacy. Reframing difficulty as evidence of growth, the natural experience of operating at the edge of your ability, directly contradicts the core distortion. Dweck's work on growth mindset is directly applicable here. When effort is seen as the mechanism of improvement rather than the sign of deficiency, the imposter cycle loses its fuel. You are sitting in a room you earned your way into. The people around you are not performing confidence because they have no doubts. They are performing confidence because they have the same doubts and have learned to act anyway. The difference between you and them is not competence. It is the story the brain tells about the competence, 70%. That is how many people in the room are running the same pattern you are. They are looking at you and thinking the same thing you are thinking about them. And not one of them is a fraud. The feeling is not the truth. It is the brain protecting an old model from an update it cannot process. And the fact that you feel like an imposter is not evidence that you are one. It is evidence that you have grown past the identity your brain is still holding onto. The fraud is not you. The fraud is the story. And stories, unlike abilities, can be rewritten. There is one more finding worth knowing, because it changes how the pattern feels the next time it arrives. Researcher Michelle Obama, in her widely discussed admission that imposter syndrome followed her through Princeton, Harvard Law, and the White House, illustrated something the research consistently confirms. The feeling does not scale with achievement. It does not go away when you reach the next level. If anything, it intensifies, because each new level presents a new group of people who seem to belong more naturally than you do. Psychologist Amy Cuddy at Harvard Business School, studying presence and self-perception, found that the imposter experience is most acute during transitions. Starting a new job, entering a new social group, receiving a promotion, moving to a new level of visibility. These are the moments when the gap between the old self-model and the new reality is widest, and the brain's resistance to updating is strongest. Cuddy's research suggests that the body can lead where the mind resists. Physical posture, breathing patterns, and behavioral choices made before the brain has finished its anxious calculations can shift the neurochemistry enough to create a window where the new identity becomes temporarily accessible. Not fake it till you make it. Act from the new identity until the brain catches up. That distinction matters because the first implies deception and the second implies practice. You are not faking it. You are in the gap between who you were and who you are becoming. And the discomfort of that gap is not evidence that you do not belong. It is the exact sensation of growth. Every person you admire felt it. Most of them still do. 70%. You are not the exception. You are the rule. And the only fraud in the room is the voice that keeps telling you otherwise.